Hey everyone. So in today's video, we're going to do something a little bit more practical. And this is some actual work that we got from the Karolinska University in Sweden. And usually we get work that's not really, shareable because they want to keep it private. But this is a government-funded organization, and they want us to make the output of this project open source. So I just want to use this opportunity to take you through how we build something on top of a vendor neutral data repository, right? Like from like this is a scope document. So from the scope till the completion of the app, what are the challenges that you face? What are the decisions that you need to make? And how do you put all of these things together, right? So I would like to take you through it as much in as much detail as I can. So this will be a series, obviously, and I can't do it in one video. This is just going to be the first installment in this series. Now, what exactly are we building? So we have a Phenotype screening tool. Okay, so this is actually already built. And there is a URL that they've given us where they've already built this application. And this Phenotype screening tool has been worked on by a bunch of researchers, and I talked to them as well. And this is very important in identifying if a child, especially if a child who's coming to a pediatrics doctor, has a certain condition before they refer them out to a geneticist, right? So having a small screening tool could help speed up this process. It could help them, fine tune the molecular diagnostic test so that it doesn't need to be more expensive than it has to be. And they do a lot of cool stuff. I'm not going to go into all of the reasons why the screening tool is required, but they have a screening tool, and this is primarily meant for children and very young kids who are coming to the clinic with a disease that looks rare. Okay, so in Karolinska, they're doing a lot of cool work on rare genetic disorders and identifying these and treating them. So this is part of that that division. So we are working with the precision medicine department for this. So let me show you how the screening tool looks like. So questionnaires for the Undiagnosed Disease Network International Diagnostic Working Group. So now the questionnaire is, I could take you through this, and it's rather, it has a lot of different data points that they're capturing. And what they actually want is, right now, the way it is working is that it's using its own database, it's having its own, data set separately, and they have another genetic application, so to say, that uses this data, but it expects the data in another format called phenopackets. Okay, so I'll also take you through phenopackets. So phenopackets is another open standard for computational bioinformatics, right? But what they also want to do is they want to store data from multiple other applications in a common CDR. So here we'll be using openEHR, and in our example, we'll be going with Airbase. So they want to store all of this information in the CDR, but the application which is called Scout here, which is a genome identification tool. I'll probably go into the depths of that later, but that expects the data format to be in phenopackets. So we are working with multiple standards here. We are working with openEHR. We'll also be looking at the existing application, how it has been built, and how we will convert it first to an openEHR repository, and how we'll convert it to an openEHR data structure. And from there, we will do an export to phenopackets, because this application expects it in this particular format. And again, phenopackets to me is like, it's more like a messaging kind of a system where you're sending it out to another system, just like FHIR or HL7V2. You're sending it out to another system. You want to capture all the semantics in your primary system, and you just send a subset of this information via phenopackets, right? So that's the approach that we are going to be taking. So now let's go through this questionnaire. I hope this is big enough. I'll make this a little bigger. Okay, So they have individual, and they ask for, what's the patient's UDP ID. So it's probably an patient identifier, the biological sex, vital status, date of birth, age at symptom onset, age of the mother at time of arrival. So there are a bunch of things here that we can immediately recognize as, okay, does this really need to be asked in every single instance of this form, right? So because you can expect, we need to also think about how the flow will work, right? So a practitioner is sitting down and a patient shows up with certain uncommon symptoms. Before they refer them out, we want them to fill this questionnaire. So practically speaking, the best way to do this would probably be, let's have a CDS hook. Let's have it, let's show them a card immediately. Let's trigger them saying that, hey, you seem to be referring this patient to a geneticist. Please fill out this form before you send them. And I think that would be like the ideal case. Okay, let's pop up a card, and then they click on a button and it opens up the app in the context of the patient, right? So they already know who the patient is, and all we need to do is like fill out extra information on this patient. So if that's the case, most of the time, all of this information would already be present in the demographics server, right? So we don't really need to re-enter all of this, but we'll come back to this. So the first process that we usually do is we go through the full, let's go through the full thing quickly. So there's a bunch of things here. Photographs, okay, photographs of the patient, all right. So there is again a pedigree chart that they can upload in the PED image format, okay, that's cool. And then here we have a family history, which is like suspected mode of inheritance. So here they can select multiple, and the patient's parents, are they consanguineous, yes or no, and then they can select multiple here, right? So the first thing that we need to do is come up with the template for this in openEHR. Like we need to pick the right archetypes, and we need to put them together in a template, right? So it's not a trivial task. Putting them together is not really trivial, and I would like to do this fully myself in this tutorial, but for the lack of time, we actually have to, get this project moving. So I've already asked my team to really work on it, and I'll show you how this looks like, right? So before that, I'll just give you a small overview on how we do things at Medblocks, right? So whenever we get a project and we have to pick archetypes, or when we have to pick the right codes, for example, like SNOMED-CT or LOINC, I usually assign it to two people at the same time and ask them to do it independently of one another. So here again, I have two templates. So one is by a more advanced, I would say, like she's been with us for a much longer time. And another one is by a more amateur person who's just coming in and who's just learning openEHR and clinical modeling. So mostly they have a lot of clinical background, and so they're able to immediately identify what is what, but they make a few rookie mistakes, right? So I just want to take you through both of these versions of how my team has actually built these forms, and just look at what we can learn from this and what the ideal template for a questionnaire like this would be. And again, I'll put all of this in the description so that you can look at this app yourself. You can view all the different sections and how you would probably model this. But the meat of the app is in the screening questions. So all of this is like extra details about the thing. And then you come to pregnancy, delivery, neonatal complications, growth at birth. All of this, they have like 45 sections. Like it's not 45, it's probably like 25 or something. And all of this looks exactly the same. And they ask for, okay, is there any abnormality of skin? Is there any abnormality of skin pigmentation? Is there any caffeole spots and so on, right? And the doctor is expected to just answer yes, no, not investigated, no. And they have some convenience methods here saying all of it is normal, no, it's abnormal, not investigated, and so on, right? So this, all of these codes, it binds back to another terminology called HPO, and that is the human ontology, the human phenotype ontology, right? So the human phenotype ontology, in my head, it's kind of like, okay, SNOMED-CT could be used here, but then it's much more detailed than SNOMED-CT where it counts. And all of the people in the genetics community, and whenever they sequence a genome and whenever they sequence a variant, they document the phenotypes that are expressed in the actual patient using HPO codes. So if we have a genetic data set or a genetic database and we want to compare, HPO codes are like super important, and that's what they've told me. So I think we need the HPO codes, and that's basically it. Like, so they have some extra things here. So they have like family chart, growth chart, some radiology imaging, previous genetic investigations, other lab tests, and so on. And then they have a section called "This is me." My caregivers are my favorite things to do. I don't like to do, and so on. That you ask the child and you fill this out. And then you have your clinical findings. Then like these are all pregnancy related findings. So you then start with the HPO codes. What is actually present, what is not present, what is not investigated, right? So let's see how our clinical modelers have done. So this UNDI genetic disorder V2, this is done by the more rookie clinical modeler, and the Tip2Toe V0 is done by the more advanced clinical modeler. So let's first look at the more rookie one so that we can spot the things quickly, right? So they've made this, so it's coming as a self-reported data. So again, the composition that you pick initially when you are starting off is important if you are querying by that. But self-reported data is probably not the correct composition to pick here, because it's technically just a questionnaire, and it's not self-reported, right? It's actually reported by the practitioner who's filling this out. So self-reported data here would probably not be the right one to use. And again, in the information source, so they've added other context, and in other context there is information source. And here, I think they've added person, mother, father, and all of this. And this makes sense if you look at the form. Like, okay, all of these data points are present in the form, but then you need to restructure how you think about things when you are moving an application from just an app in isolation versus an app that is using a vendor neutral data repository, right? Because all of this data is already present in some other place. So as much as possible, and again, I know in the US there is this statistic that about like 60 or 70% of the data is just repeated. People just copy paste the history of presenting illness again and again and again, and it's just a mess, right? Like, if 70% of the data is just like repeated mess, the actual information is really hard to find. So to avoid that, the way you build an application on top of a clinical data repository, especially on top of openEHR and FHIR, if you have all of this in place, you try to just capture the information that you really need at that point, right? So technically this application is trying to capture the radiology imaging reports, the other lab reports. Yes, while we could capture all of this in the same form, just one step back, and if you start thinking about it, is this not going to be present in the EHR to begin with? Is this not going to be, like entered in by the lab application into the same clinical data repository, right? So if you take a look at the bigger picture, then you start to see that, okay, this application, this Tip2Toe questionnaire, what is unique to that? Let's model only that, right? So that's the approach that we would want to take. So again, like here, person, mother, all of these are demographic archetypes, but then I would still be very wary of using them in the template itself, because you need to make sure that the data is not already represented elsewhere. Maybe they store patients in a FHIR server. Maybe they already know the gender of the patient, and you don't need to again enter it in a form again and again, right? So most of these I would not be going with. And again, gender, there is gender identity here, but again, if you're going to represent this in the demographic server, maybe a FHIR server with a patient resource, go ahead with that. This is probably not required. Okay. Now here they have vital status, and the vital status says alive, dead, or unknown. And that I think is, yes, valid, because they do have vital status here, alive, dead, or deceased, and that maps like quite well here. So I would say like, yes, +1 for vital status. That's probably the right archetype. Date of birth, again, demographic, probably not something you want to ask them again and again, right? Like you their date of birth once you've asked it. They're not going to be born differently every single time. So again, here let's go with, so I think date of birth, no. Vital status, yes, that's a good one. It's a good catch. And again, that's the advantage of having two people model this at the same time, because there are some things that one of them will model well and the other won't. And then, like, if you look at the average of it, it's much better than just one person looking at it and modeling, right? So referring UDP. Again, so this is the, so here we do have a field for referring UDP. I'm not exactly sure what UDP represents here. I probably need to go back and ask. But if it is information about the referring practitioner, who is referring this and or which department is referring this, I would capture it as a context information. Like if a particular, there is a composer field in the composition itself, which you can use to capture which user is entering this information, right? So we'll need to like recheck this, but I would probably not include any of this, even like, for example, ethnicity of patient and so on. Again, like age of mother at time of referral, age of father at time of referral, age of onset of symptoms. I think the age of onset of symptoms is pretty important. The age of mother and father at the time of referral, while I think if we can't capture it anywhere else, then probably makes sense to put it along in the form. But we need to make sure that, okay, is there no better way to model this in another way, right? So, but I think this is okay. Date of birth, all of this biological sex should not go into this main form. It should instead be stored in the demographic server. Okay. So ethnicity, okay, I would not do this either. And you have sign and symptom screening questionnaire. Now, it's interesting that this archetype has been picked here because I think to some extent, yes, it is a sign and symptom screening questionnaire. You are asking for multiple signs and symptoms and you are just like saying yes, no, not investigated. And it's the right archetype, but the way it's been modeled here is kind of incorrect. So age at symptom onset. Yes, so you have this thing in the top. What was the age at the symptom onset? You could capture that here. That's perfectly fine. But I would also like to include other information here. So we'll look at that in the other form, right? We'll come back to that. So family history. You have, again, per family member history, and you have like you have a bunch of fields here. So let's go back and check the more experienced modeler and see how they've done. Okay, I think they kind of much more in line with how we usually do things, which is like leave all the demographics out. That data will already come from somewhere else anyway, and then they've just taken it from Encounter, which I would say yes, Encounter V1 is not a bad choice of parent compose archetype for this. And let's see, pedigree. So they start with family history basically. Okay, so see, here they've taken the family history archetype and they've renamed it to pedigree. Although can the full, so let's see here. Okay. So here the pedigree is renamed from family history, and then they only have the multimedia file and a content, and this is to capture this image, which is fine, which is accurate. But there is also another family history here to look for the family prevalence and the genetic predisposition, the inheritance type, and so on. What I would probably do is I would just include both of these together in the same section, in the same family history, and not have a separate pedigree of family history and a separate just family history section. But I think this modeling is pretty good, which is they've captured the family history and they have like autosomal dominant, recessive X, and all of this, mother, father. So here in openEHR, the genetic predisposition, is there a genetic basis for the identified risk? So this yes or no would probably be optional to record as true if it's recognized. In many cases, this may be inferred as a risk factor. So I would say this would probably be true if the parent already has something or there is consanguineous marriage between them and so on, right? So inheritance type, let's see the constraints. Okay, all of these have been added as local codes, which I would say is fine, which is good. And here the relationship, we only have like first degree relative, second degree relative, genetic family, non-genetic family, right? Which is not bad. I would say there is much more detail here. If we want, we could just use the external coded and then like override this. But I would again go back and ask them, do you really need all of this information, or is it okay to just use these codes here? So switch to terminal. No, I don't want to proceed. So we'll keep the internal codes for now because I want to capture as much information in the family history archetype as possible, because data reuse, right? So here in the relationship, I think this should be okay. Do you really need all of this information? If, even if you do, there is a possibility that we can show them in the UI what exactly they want to select. And then when we are storing it in the archetype, we pick one of these, right? So it depends on whether this is of significance when we're using another application like Scout or the other ecosystem apps, right? So let's go to growth chart, right? So again, like let's go to the next archetype. So I would say family history is pretty good. It's just that both of these could probably be the same archetype, and we could just have put the media file under the family history. Okay. Now growth chart, growth velocity. Okay. So let's. I think both of these were. So both of the modelers did the same mistake here, which is they picked growth velocity instead of the growth for the growth chart, right? So I get the confusion. So the rate of growth or the change in growth measurement over a period in time. So here, technically, both of these, the modelers have picked growth chart, weight at last visit, length at last visit. So these data points are present, except this is actually the rate of growth. So even here you have like gram per day, and you have millimeter per day. So this is always going to be the rate of growth. So again, they've canceled this out and they have another, they've inserted another slot here for birth details, under which we have gestational age and content. But I would not include growth velocity as a growth chart. So this is probably not I think again here they're not really capturing everything. The more advanced modeler did not capture anything. They just have the birth detail, and probably like they wanted to use this current and previous growth charts slot to just insert the content, which I think is not a bad idea, which is because let's say that you upload a picture and you are able to store that here, and then you're able to automatically calculate the growth velocity, right? So if you're able to calculate the growth velocity from that point, then maybe yes, you could use growth velocity. But the data points here, which is like birth length and birth weight, do not correspond to growth velocity. In both the cases, I would say like the growth velocity is not the right archetype to pick here. You would instead just use the normal. Again, like here, I think this is correct. So they have body weight, weight at last visit, and the weight itself, right? So this is, I think the advanced modeler has kind of gotten this right here, which is, yes, you can use growth velocity, but then make sure that you don't actually capture anything in the weight here. And this is rate of weight change, and this is rate of height change. So if you're capturing this, then this needs to automatically be populated from the growth chart, right? So that's cool. I think they have also gone ahead and captured the body weight, height, head circumference, and all of this is like at birth, and this is any event, which is like the last visit, right? So let them capture both. That's fine. So this would be pretty accurate. I think this is pretty accurate. Here, the more rookie modeler has not really captured that as an actual body weight, length, head circumference archetype. So yeah, I mean, that's fine. But we should be sure that we don't use the growth velocity archetype in again, like if we go to the CKM and if we check the growth velocity, So again, feel free to skip through the video and like go to the sections which you find more helpful. This is probably very useful for clinical information modelers on how to pick the right archetypes and how to do this research, right? So they probably did something like growth, they searched growth, and they came with growth velocity, right? The rate of growth change in measurement over a period in time. So here, not to be used to record the actual point in time measurement of length, and they're very clear in saying that okay, don't use it for this. Use the body weight and body height for this, right? So here, it's important to understand that what they are capturing here is the point in time. So it's birth length. It's not the rate of length change. It's just birth length, birth weight, head circumference, right? And same here, like at last visit, length, weight, height, right? So I would say I would probably give 10 on 10 for this. Like this body weight, height, and circumference, capturing it using any event and birth, and I'm also kind of envious about the how the openEHR people have modeled this archetype to represent both birth and any event. In most of the situations, we cancel out birth, but in this situation, yes, they are specifically asking for birth weight, so you use birth here. Okay. So this is good. This is a good way to use it. Growth velocity, no, don't use this unless you're actually representing the rate of change in a structured format. And again, if you see the units, it's gram per day, it's kg per month, and so on. So this is for the rate of change. If you're automatically calculating something from the growth chart, then yes, but otherwise no. In this case, okay, yeah, we're probably not going to automatically calculate it from an image, but let's keep it, because we can put the growth chart under the growth velocity and then like do something later on. Okay. Radiology imaging, and again, they've done their best to put the imaging examination result, which is the correct archetype, but then I don't actually expect this to come from this form. So if everything is right in the system, we expect the radiology reports to already be present in the CDR. And we don't want them to enter, like upload lab results and upload radiology imaging data here. Okay. So again, same for lab test results. So here as well, they have previous genetic investigations, and they have a bunch of like slots for media files, and they have a bunch of things that are specific for genomic investigations, right? Now, yes, we could have this as part of this form, and again, but they have also included other lab tests, right? So as much as possible, we would first need to understand, can this be put somewhere else? Do we want this as part of this form? Because this application, its only job is to do phenotype screening, so it shouldn't try to do like so many other things, right? So I would say the archetypes are right. The lab test results, especially with the media file, that's pretty accurate. That's correct. And I think this is the rookie one, and it's pretty good. Lab test result, all right. That's good. And again, clinical findings. This is for the clinical findings, the clinical synopsis. That's pretty accurate. Again, I would give 10 on 10 for this selection. Now, coming to the more, yeah. So here you have clinical, again, they chose the exact same archetype, like diagnostic test result. They just put it in a section, and I think they have imaging test result, and uh, it's the exact same archetypes. Both of them picked almost exactly the same archetypes. But we need to consider, do we need this? Do we need this in this app? Is it better off if this app does not capture this information and this information comes from somewhere else, right? And we could just include it in a summary report when we show it to the final destination, right? So I think for now that's okay. We'll probably like include it as part of the same app, because our assignment is to recreate the app as much as possible on top of an openEHR CDR. So we'll do that. Clinical finding, clinical synopsis, again, like same thing. So now delivery. Delivery. Okay. So here, delivery as a clinical synopsis. Oh, they just added the birth detail and the mode of delivery. Okay. 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 So again, the birth detail, ideally, yes, you want to capture it as birth detail and the gestational age and so on, but it's very important to understand if the birth detail needs to go into the EHR of the mother or the child. Okay, a subset of persistent or summary information about the pregnancy and birth of an infant selected for utility of the use within both maternal and infant. Okay, so here they are explicitly stating that this is selected for utility of use within both the maternal and infant health records. So it's okay to put this data in the infant record as well. So yes, I'm okay with this, but again, we might need to just see a little bit more if we can model this a little better, right? Because birth detail, um, again here, it's not really the birth detail. It's technically they're wanting to just express multiple phenotypes here as just yes or no. So if you ask me, I would initially start with just representing this whole thing as sign or symptom screening questionnaire, right? And here, I think that's what they've done anyway. They've taken a sign or symptom screening questionnaire and like they've renamed it to pregnancy and the presence of any sign or symptom, yes, no, unknown. I think that corresponds exactly to the top, yes, no, unknown. And here in the sign or symptom, they have all of these codes, right? All of these oligohydramnios, polyhydramnios. So I think this is really good work by the more advanced clinical modeler. Think like she's been with us for more than a year now, so I think all of this is pretty good. But the new one, the more the rookie modeler. Let's see how she has done it. Okay. Yes. So this is, you are not supposed to do this. Okay, so pregnancy summary and obstetric summary. Now, um, pregnancy summary, while yes, if you look at it on the outset here, if you look at, okay, they're asking for pregnancy and they're asking for all of this, it might be tempting to just go here and search for, okay, pregnancy, and obviously you will find pregnancy summary and you will find pregnancy like care summary and so on. You'll find all of these things, but this should not belong to the EHR of the child, right? Like if you have a female child and you have a pregnancy summary that you're recording as part of this child's birth, and then later on this female child, like again, we are talking about a lifelong record that you maintain throughout a patient's journey from birth till death, right? So if you record pregnancy summary here to record the information about this child's birth, then if this child is female and she becomes pregnant and you don't want to, if a doctor is asking, hey, can I see the pregnancy summary, you don't want to show this, right? So I would say both pregnancy summary and obstetric summary here are very no, this is again like G2P2. This is the obstetric summary of the mother. This should not be present in this form because right now you are talking in the context of the child, right? This whole screening questionnaire is in the context of the child. So I would kind of stay away from these archetypes which are meant to represent the obstetric history of the mother, right? So it should be in the mother's EHR, not the child's EHR. And again, I think the more rookie person has done their best to find out the relevant archetypes for all of these different sections. For example, feeding, growth at birth, and delivery, and so on. But it's a screening questionnaire, right? We are trying to get a screening questionnaire. It's not a doctor actually entering, for example, under the child growth indicator section that, okay, it's not a pediatrician entering that information definitively. We are just asking yes, no, maybe. So in my opinion, again, like things can vary here. Somebody might disagree. And again, in the end, it depends on the use case and how exactly you're going to query this data back and how you're going to use it. But in my opinion, I would not want to structure this into all of the different archetypes that are relevant for all of these data points. Yes, we could do this as a secondary exercise. Maybe once you have these data points, you might want to like calculate other ones and then put that in the record. But to begin with, I would say this type of modeling where we start going into each separate archetype, for example, feeding, child growth indicators, speech, and so on, is a little too much to start off with. Instead, I like the approach by the more advanced modeler who's just taken the sign symptom screening questionnaire, renamed it for each section, and each sign symptom name, we have the things that are relevant here, right? So again, it's easy to get confused by the UI. Like you look at the UI and you think, okay, each data point needs to correspond to one place in the template, right? But that's not the case. You can easily just have, for example, sign and symptom screening questionnaire, and you have an any event that's 0 to multiple. So you can represent multiple instances of this pretty easily. And again, if you go to specific sign and symptom, again, it's 0 to multiple. So you can represent multiple instances here as well. And under the sign and symptom, you just give a list of all things that are, they can possibly take and choose from, right? And this could, again, they're not limited to this list. So you could add your own terms here, which becomes very important because they have a feature here which, searches the HPO codes, and you are able to select these HPO codes and then tell yes, no, not investigated, right? So this is probably a very good way to model this. And in fact, I would actually even go one step further. Like, why would you want to, you don't need to have a separate archetype for all of this. In fact, all of this can be one, and again, that's the advantage here. So here they have, the more rookie modeler has actually figured that the age of onset of symptom, which is way in the beginning, which is in the individual here, actually belongs in the sign and symptom screening questionnaire, right? Like, so all we need to do is we could have one of this. In fact, you don't need multiple events. You could actually cut this down to one, and you could just have the sign and symptom be set to 0 to multiple. And here, again, the way that they've actually modeled this is just like copying all the code. Let me see if I can just copy all of these codes. Edit value set. Oh, we can just do copy. Okay. Hopefully, if I do Control V, it just works there. So let's see here. So let's say we want external coded and we want local terms and we want to edit this value set. Let's paste. Oh, that just works flawlessly. Okay. So all of this is pregnancy related codes. Okay. So now what I would do is rename this here to pregnancy. Right. So in pregnancy, now you have all of these sign and symptom codes. You are still under the same sign and symptom screening questionnaire, and you can enter multiple of these. You are allowed to enter things out of the list as well. So don't limit it to this list. Now, what about the next one? What about what do you have after pregnancy? You have delivery, right? All I would do is I would just clone this node and call it delivery, right? And you don't want these exact same codes sticking around. You instead want the codes for delivery, right? So you have delivery here. Let me see if, okay, for some reason, okay, she hasn't included delivery because I think she's already included that here. But I would represent delivery exactly in the same way as a sign and symptom screening questionnaire, right? Although in this case, it does go into the EHR of the child, and we are representing it as a sign and symptom screening questionnaire for the child. But here the context of a HPO code is good enough that when they say, abnormal delivery, they know that they're talking about this current child. They're not talking about the mother, right? So because HPO codes are meant for genomics and they're meant for diagnosing these diseases. So if a HPO code is used in sign and symptom and that's put under the EHR of the child, you're still okay. Like you understand the context that it's for the child. But if you start using the obstetric summary and the pregnancy summary archetypes, which are clearly meant for the mother and the mother's EHR, then you start confusing people, right? Like then somebody in obstetrics might come and like, what is this summary that you have here, right? So we don't want that happening. So it's very important. Again, like when you have a shared clinical data repository, it's super important to understand and model the context well. And because data is all you have, right? Like if you model the data right and you are able to store this, then it's going to persist for life, and that's the goal. So you want to get this right. So that's why I would be very critical of using the especially the pregnancy summary and the obstetric summary here is a clear no-no. Here, sign and symptom questionnaire is a much better choice. And in fact, I'd probably have to combine both of this to come up with the final template. But let's go here. So sign and symptom screening questionnaire, pregnancy, delivery. I think I'll just copy paste the codes later. So you will probably like just duplicate the node. And what do we have? What's the next one? Neonatal period complications. So let's rename this. Neonatal period complications. And again, that has already been modeled by the more advanced modeler. So let's edit this. Let's copy that. Let's go back here, edit this. Can I get rid of everything together? Okay. Let me try a Control V. Okay, that just replaced it. Cool. So neonatal respiratory distress. So this is good, right? So if we do this for all the sections, I would actually say the whole questionnaire, the only thing unique is probably a little bit about the pedigree and the family history, and then maybe some of these specific lab investigations, and then all of this, there's like multiple sections. All of this needs to go in one single sign and symptom screening questionnaire, right? And we can have multiple sections here, and all of them have 0 to multiple, so you can always represent like multiple instances of these. But all of these need to go under the same archetype, and we can also capture the age at symptom onset. Any sign or symptom also, I would say yes. That's a good thing to have yes, no, unknown. So if they have anything, then yes, they do, right? And yeah, so here, for example, the presence, I would also include this because you want to say yes, no, or unknown to each instance of this, right? So you want to include all of this and any sign. Okay. So I would say this by itself captures like 80% of the information here in this form. And the remaining stuff, it's very important to go back and ask them. I'll probably go back and ask them next week. Do you really need this in this form? Are we going to work on maybe, integrating radiology images actually from another system into the CDR as well as the right composition, as the right archetype there? It doesn't need to go into this form, right? So it's important to not overload the clinician with so much, like different sections and like lab tests, like enter everything, because that data might already be there. So it's just what is unique here is just the pregnancy, delivery, and all of these phenotype codes. And this is probably what, Phenopackets wants as well. So we will pause here. I think this has been a pretty long session in itself in clinical modeling and how to really take a real life example and then model it. It's not as, it's not as clear cut as the tutorials would suggest. Like if you've taken my openEHR course, it's easier to model it because most of the exercises have been designed for you to learn. Like initially, like just get started, right? But this is a real world example. There are things that I don't know as well. Like I'm not sure if certain things are right, but we just try to make the best decision with the information we have. So that's why we usually I let 2 people do it and then see okay what's the best approach that we can take. We can always ask the stakeholders, how would you like this model? What are your querying requirements and so on. So that's it. This is just the first installment where we just went over the template and how we would probably build this. So I think the data is super important. Like whatever application that we build, I think, yes, it's probably going to be a little complex, but then if the data is not right, it does not make any sense to build the application on top of it, right? So we need to understand the data, understand what the requirements are. And in fact, if a template comes directly from my clients, like if the person assigning us is able to model the templates, then I'm like, yes, that's the best thing to have, because they decide the semantics of the data they're going to capture. They are closer to it and they know how they want it and like how they are representing different things. But here we try our best to do it the correct way, but there is no exact correct answer most of the times, and you need to think about the context and what it means for them during query time, right? So what do you want to see? So that's about it. I think I'll end this video now. We'll again see maybe the next one. You just follow me, subscribe so that you are notified on the next one. We'll probably just come up with a solid template and then start building an application using the template, using Medblocks UI. Okay, so see you then. Bye bye.